Imagine having access to a tribe of mentors consisting of some of the best tech leaders in the world. People you may have never heard of, but who in just an hour, you will know their unfiltered career story. The bets they took, the decisions they made, where they failed, and the lessons that they learned along the way. Welcome to the What Makes You Tick podcast. Hello, I'm Tolu, aka the Podfather, and I'm the host of What Makes You Tick.
Hello, Podfather. I'm Richard Washington, founder of Tick Talent. We're delighted to sponsor this podcast, as always, particularly this week, because it's not our standard kind of guest. Podfather, tell us more.
This week, we have Devon on the podcast, and it's a very interesting episode. So I remember when you first showed me Devon, and I started looking through his posts, and they were just epic. Some of the stuff he talks about is very interesting, very exciting. But yeah, he's more of a marketing head, isn't he, Devon? But also just an absolute don with compensation.
So yeah, absolutely. So Devon is someone who's come from not the traditional sales background that a lot of our guests have come from, like a very high level of marketing. And he's a true executive level person. The way that he communicates is, quite frankly, preposterous. It's so wonderfully eloquent and with such a high level of gravitas. And I saw his content on LinkedIn. He's one of these people who's very active on LinkedIn, but not just talking about random things and, you know, look at me on this beach. It's incredibly to the point. Bam. Are you looking to go and negotiate your salary? Got a job offer? Want to go and get the right deal on compensation? Want to get the right equity package? He's written a compensation Bible, which I absolutely love as a name. And his content just cuts through to the absolute core of the issue in such a wonderful way, beautifully edited videos and perfectly delivered. So I said, Tolu, please let's get this guy on the podcast. And luckily he's on a bit of a podcast tour promoting this incredible business that he's built, pivoting away from being a marketing executive to helping executive people get the best possible deal from their negotiation. And I love negotiations on the topic, and I can't claim to be an expert. So to have someone who is created a business off the back of their knowledge of this subject in such an important part of the market that doesn't really get talked about very much, for me is the absolute perfect guest. As the man who had the conversation, what did you enjoy most?
When I have to negotiate my next exec package, there's only one place I'm going. So I think he was just really, really nice guy, really easy to talk to, and he's just brilliant. So
yeah, absolutely. If anyone who's looking to negotiate their next job offer, please go and see Devon. And if you would like to know a bit more about the man behind the Bible, without further ado, let's roll the VT.
Devon, welcome to What Makes You Tick. Thank you so much for joining us today.
So happy to be here. How's it going?
Very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. We're spanning the ocean here. We're Commonwealth pals coming together.
So question, is the Queen still on your money, or is it now the King?
The Queen.
Still the Queen?
I don't know. I don't know if there must be a plan to update it, surely. But everything I've seen, everything I've got, still Elizabeth.
Okay. I think we've started to roll out the King, but, you know, you guys are over the pond, so we'll see what happens. So what makes you tick, Devon?
What makes me tick? I think I am a small town kid with a big chip on his shoulder kind of thing. Don't know how many of your listeners identify with that, but I am from like the smallest of small towns, Canada. Do you know where Saskatchewan is? Could you point that out on a map?
No,
you could?
I've heard of, no, I've heard of it, but I couldn't tell you where it is.
Okay, so usually I'll tell Americans, like, picture Montana and just drive north forever. Just keep driving north, and that helps them. But it's basically like middle of nowhere, super flat, super cold. Came from there, always had the big city, big career dreams, and probably everything's just been, you know, trying to figure things out from there.
Why do you think that put a chip on your shoulder?
Maybe it's a DNA thing. You know, I had a dad who was very entrepreneurial, made a lot of money in the oil patch, but quit that to go start his own bar and businesses. My grandpa before that was, you know, the typical immigrant story, fleeing World War II, coming here, working on the railroad until he saved up enough money to start a farm and support his family that way. So I think there's a lot of that in the blood that's just, you know, always wanted to do better, always wanting to, you know, live up to the family dream.
And where did your granddad emigrate from?
From Poland. So this was the whole trying to get out of there as quickly as possible story and bring the whole rest of the family with them.
Have you ever been back?
I have. And that's actually the first trip, believe it or not, I did with my wife, then girlfriend at the time, which is like kind of mind blowing. If you're like picture a new relationship, picture like, oh, honey, where do you want to go on our first romantic journey? Should we go to France or Italy? No, let's go to Poland. And it was actually fantastic. I recommend it. You got all your history, you got all your, beautiful cities, Krakow and all that is just gorgeous. So do it.
So I went once for a wedding, but I was in Lublin and it was just beautiful. It was an amazing place, amazing people. And I was quite surprised, to be honest.
Yeah, there's something about that like Eastern European vibe that's very different, but like less wild than the other side kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And what is the problem that you solve? Like, who are you as a person? What problem do you love to solve?
Well, I mean, what I'm doing right now is a lot of helping people avoid the mistakes that I made in my career. So people are listening to this, probably haven't heard of me before. For those who haven't, I mean, the real, in a nutshell, is that for a long time, I was an executive at tech companies and private and public companies and made a lot of mistakes. Like this is kind of the thing. No one teaches you how to negotiate executive compensation. No one teaches you how to operate like a good VP. So you have to make all these mistakes and learn the hard way. So a couple of years ago, I had this little light bulb go off where I'm like, okay, I think I've climbed that ladder. I've done that thing. I've learned these lessons. I want to go help other people avoid those same mistakes. So that's essentially what I've done with books and content on social media and now a community I'm launching and all these other fun things. So those are the problems I'm really trying to help solve is help executives negotiate as much as possible and operate as best as possible.
And what's the purpose of the community? Like, what's that about? Who's it for?
So the community is not live yet. I'm hoping to launch it in the fall here in the next month or so, but it will be for executives. So it'll be for, call it directors, VPs, SVPs, any of the C-suite type thing. And the mission is back to that. How do you accelerate your career, operate better, and negotiate as much as possible? I have a lot of executives I work with asking for this. This is kind of like a ground up sort of thing. I wasn't really thinking about launching it until so many people came and said, we want this. When can we have it? I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I better get on that.
Should start that, yeah.
But it's just continuing a lot of the content I've done so far, which is, again, getting savvy about not leaving any money on the table, connecting and learning from other executives, because there's not a lot of great places to do that. And at the executive level, especially, like a lot of the questions you have, you just can't Google. Like you need to connect with somebody else who's been there, done that. And then I also hope it's fun. I hope we can do things like, virtual wine tastings and business book clubs and all these other cool things that not a lot of other places offer. So yeah, looking forward to it.
That's awesome. And something I was thinking about from when I was looking through some of your content is that American culture or North American culture is very different to English culture, for example. Do you find that a lot of these principles work across different cultures, or is it quite specific to North America?
Yeah, I think the general principles of like what makes a good leader, how to negotiate, like we're all kind of human beings that negotiate with each other in different ways. Maybe there are like cultural differences sometimes, but overall, those things are very universal. And the differences are more when you get into the weeds and the details of, what is acceptable, like market rates in different places, or how to negotiate equity in different cultures, or all those like little nuances, I think, are what's different. Fixed versus permanent contracts versus at will employment, like all that stuff is what I would call like in the weeds. But the big stuff, the confidence to negotiate, the leadership frameworks, like all that is universal to me.
That makes sense. And what makes a good leader to you?
I've taken exactly one leadership course in my life in university, and I'll give you the academic answer. The academic answer that always stuck with me from that one course, the only thing that ever stuck with me, was that good leaders do what they say they're going to do. So it's this like accountability piece, which there is more to it than that. But if I was going to summarize an entire course on this, that's kind of what I took away from the whole Kouzos and Posner books and that whole framework. So definitely good leaders do what they say they're going to do. But beyond that, to operate as a good leader, a lot of what I talk about again and again and again is sort of like a 3-prong approach. There's hiring. Certainly a big chunk of what you're going to do is who you bring on and making sure you've got the right team around you. There's communication. How well are you communicating both up to your bosses, down to your team, across to other cross-functional leaders? And then there's a culture piece. So great, you've hired all the great people and you're communicating well, but how do you kind of go beyond that to build a really special culture that people really want to show up and stay around for and recruit others to and all that? So, I mean, that would be the triple whammy there.
And I wanted to go back to something you said earlier about you climbing the ladder. I'd love to hear the story of how you got into sales and then what was your journey up until when you decided to start helping other people.
Sure. So let's, I guess, wind the clock back. I already said I'm from Saskatchewan, middle of nowhere. How did I get from the farm to the
to the big city?
I guess is the origin story here. Yeah. And you know, I after school went to business school and did that whole thing, very traditional. But again, back to the dreams and wanting to do something big, I thought, maybe I'm an entrepreneur. Maybe I'm going to start a company and we're going to do something big right after school. So a bunch of my friends and I started this company. It was like a local media company. Think of it like an MTV meets a local news network kind of thing. And it totally failed. It like in a year that just completely blew up. It was a total dumpster fire, like movie stuff. People having mental breakdowns and like takeovers and all this crap. So that was just a whole shit show. Bleep that if you want. But after that, I'm like broke and no job and no, options on the table. So I thought maybe entertainment, not entrepreneurship, entertainment's my thing. I'm going to go be a game show host. There was an ad to be like the next game show host for this. I mean, I can explain it later. It's not like Jeopardy we're talking about, but they needed these game show hosts. So I'm like, okay, I'll go do that. So I went and I did that. And that was a whole crazy chapter. That was probably the best job I've ever had. But it still wasn't like gonna be the rest of my life. So after that is when I got into tech. And it was a complete accident that I stumbled from that into tech. But from there, I mean, it was like a make your own luck situation. I got in with a hot startup. Everyone in tech was on a rocket ship. I was able to leapfrog roles from director all the way up to VP very quickly. And that's kind of when my corporate mistakes started. That's when, I was new to the tech world. I didn't know how to negotiate stock options or kind of what I should have done or had in my comp package as an executive. Certainly no severance, no milestone bonuses, no terms on equity, none of that, like completely clueless. So I enjoyed my time at that company, but it kind of hit a ceiling and I went from there to a public company and did some more leapfrogging. So anyway, that's how I guess did the whole more traditional corporate ladder. But from there, a couple of years ago, I jumped that ship and have been doing my own little content production stuff now.
So you said about leapfrogging and you said it was kind of a bit traditional, but traditionally people don't really leapfrog. So what do you think made you special in that sense that you were able to leapfrog? Because it sounded like it wasn't just something that happened once, but it sounded like that was quite a consistent thing for you.
I think that's more common at like startups, right? So when I joined this tech company I talked about, it was 30 people. Like the marketing team was 2 people, me and one of the founders, right? So it's a rising tides lifts all boats sort of thing. When the company grows, which, got a lot of funding, it was growing very, very quickly, you're riding that wave up. So very, soon into that, I had a team beneath me. I was no longer Mr. Individual Contributor. I'm now Mr. Director, and then Mr. VP as the whole organization grows. And obviously I must have been doing something right. Otherwise they wouldn't have, kept promoting me along the way. But that's a shortcut. That's a little bit of a cheat code, is to get in at a startup that, is growing quickly and ride that kind of wave.
What were some of the adjustments that you had to make as a leader? So at what point in your career did you start leading people, and what were some of the adjustments you had to make to become a good leader?
Right. Well, I've always been an operator, like first and foremost. I've always been very hands-on. I think you asked about sales earlier. I'm much more marketing than sales. I've never actually really been a salesperson. But when it comes to marketing and all the different functions of marketing, from SEO to building websites to social media and email marketing, yada, 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 down the list, I'm very much a practitioner. Like, I can go in and do the thing. So most of my leadership, I guess, experience, or most of my leadership style comes from the respect that you get from knowing what you're talking about, like hiring people who come in and you can give like actually good feedback to, or, they know that you've held that bag, or you've done that thing, or you know how to do it and can give good advice. So, there are different flavors of leadership, and that's always been mostly my flavor, is to gain respect by being the one who's been there, done it, kind of thing.
And you mentioned that you were more marketing than sales, but a lot of your content is really, really good for salespeople in negotiating their packages.
Well, now, yeah. So it is kind of funny. I found myself in that niche. I mean, salespeople are just more natural born negotiators and wired for how do I get the most money in general. So I'm not surprised that a lot of my content has taken off there really well. And I get a lot of CROs and VPs of sales reaching out to me and wanting feedback on their comp packages and all that. So definitely do, if you're listening and that's you. But this is, again, applicable across roles, across functions, across borders. Like, it is something that everyone can learn to do better, which is negotiate and earn what they're worth, get paid, not played, kind of thing. And so I'm trying to reach all roles, all functions, all backgrounds, because it can definitely benefit more than just the salespeople.
That's really interesting, because I really thought from your content it was more for sales, but now it really makes sense about how it can help everybody.
I've got all sorts of randos reaching out, which is great. I love it. And I try and mention that whenever possible, that it's like for any industry, for any role, because I've worked with like executives in like dentist practices. I've worked with executives in crypto and on the more like CFO and CTO side. And I love it because I get to see all these different types of incentive plans and comp packages and everything. And it's just really interesting to me.
So you mentioned you made some mistakes along the way. What were some of the biggest mistakes that you made in your career?
Well, if I separate it into those two buckets of like operating and then negotiating, like the negotiating one is easier to break down because it's like there are just mistakes I think people make around what they can negotiate. Like, especially a lot of new executives aren't familiar with all the different terms that are available to them. Again, like severance, like stock options, special terms on their stock options, yada, yada, yada. So there's just some like education people are missing out on because no one teaches you how to do it. So they make mistakes around that. They make mistakes around how to negotiate. They're not handling objections great. They're not positioning themselves well. They're not using odd numbers and bolstering ranges and all those things that like good negotiators do. So they're like tactics that people mess up on. And then the third thing is a bit more woo-woo, but it's almost the most important thing, which is the mindset piece. Like, a lot of people aren't confident, don't know why they should negotiate, are scared to negotiate, like don't want an offer to pass them by, when in reality they have the most leverage they're ever going to have when they get an initial offer, right? So Those are the big negotiation, like the big compensation mistakes people make. And everyone can be making more than they're currently making, unless you are like, Chris Voss himself, FBI hostage negotiator. Like, you can be doing better than you're currently doing. And that's what I'm here to help people figure out. So those are all the mistakes that I made. I didn't know how to negotiate or what to negotiate along the way. On the operating side, I think a lot of the mistakes I made could all be summarized by like, I was trying to be someone I wasn't. And this is probably why I ultimately left the whole like executive track, because after having climbed that career ladder for so long and gotten to the top of the top at a public company, it just wasn't making me happy, and I had to do some soul searching on why that was. And often the things that you're like not good at or make mistakes around are because you're just not interested in them, or you're not, your attention's elsewhere, or you'd rather be doing something else. So like, for example, for me, like there were just so many parts about being a VP that I wasn't passionate about. I really I'm not good at I'm not world class at these things like budgeting, team building, people management. Like a lot of that just feels boring or like adult babysitting to me. So if it feels boring and irritating to me, I'm not going to be the best in the world at it. I'm going to make a lot of mistakes around it. And I should focus on what my zone of genius is, which ended up being more writing, consulting, community building, content development. And I'm much happier now than I was. So some of it is around that self-awareness and just getting better at having conversations with yourself around like these mistakes I'm making, or I'm unhappy here, or my boss is flagging this over and over. Like, why is that? Like, have some self-awareness to say, do I want to get better at this? Great. I mean, nobody's perfect at everything. So then work hard at getting better at it, or find your alternate path, because inertia is deadly. A lot of people think they're going to quit after their next paycheck or vesting period or whatever, but they don't, because again, inertia is just very, very powerful. And, figure out what do your idols do that people who you look up to, people who you think don't make mistakes, or, everybody does make mistakes, but people who you like really admire and want to be like, what is their path, and how can you emulate that a little bit more? And that helps steer me in the direction that I wanted to go.
And who are some of those people that in your soul searching phase that you looked up to as these are some of the people that I wanted to emulate?
I mean, all my idols are creators. So there's like the modern version of creator, which is your YouTuber, TikTok, or whatever. Yeah. But my version is more like older generation. So like, this is getting real specific and deep, but like my whole youth and growing up and everything was like very entertainment focused, and like my idols would be like Howard Ashman and Alan Menken, like the creators of like the music of the Disney movies. It would be like Jonathan Larson, the Broadway phenom who comes to like write Rent from nothing in his apartment in Alphabet City, like a lot of writers, a lot of like rags to riches, people who created something from nothing. And those folks I call creators, and would probably be the ones that I look up to most.
I think it's just such a different world. So I met someone, they're like, I recognize you. They're like, are you a YouTuber? And I had to actually think, I was like, well, I'm not, but I am on YouTube. So like, it's so different now with the whole, like I'm not actually a YouTuber, but that whole creator thing takes such a different meaning now than it used to before.
Yeah. I think that's definitely like, it's become a little pejorative, like to say you're a content creator or influencer or whatever. I know some people have started calling themselves producers instead, because they're like, oh, it just sounds better.
That's new.
So use that if you want that. But I mean, what is it at the end of the day? It is putting out content. It is, sharing your thoughts and ideas and strategies and whatever with people so that they can connect.
How did you decide to write your first book?
Well, I mean, let's get into therapy mode for a second, because this is going way back to childhood. This is, as early as I can remember, I wanted to be a writer.
Wow.
The earliest memories, like back to kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, like reading all the fun Roald Dahl fiction and the, kids' books and everything. I'm like, that's what I want to do. So, I mean, the first things I wrote were kids' stories, were like children's books. And I have a whole collection of them here that I've since published, and I do fiction. I have an agent. I write horror and thrillers. Like to this day, I've always been a writer. So that is like core identity from childhood, in the bones, in the blood, whatever. The business stuff just came naturally into that world. Well, I want to help people avoid making mistakes with whatever. My superpower is writing, so I guess the first thing I'm going to do is write these books. And the nature of the book business is, margins suck and it's really hard. And it's, promoting books is just a terrible slog. But with the business books, they provide real value, right? Like they're much easier to sell than a kid's book is, than, a horror book is or whatever. Because, you're helping people with their career, and I've made, I pay my mortgage with my business books. I cannot pay my mortgage with my kids' books right now. So it's just, it's I can't tell you where it came from or why, but it's just there. The writing thing's always been there.
And what's some of the favorite like testimonials or feedback that you've had from some of your books?
I mean, I have been floored by the business stuff, because I get executives reaching out daily at this point saying this, relieved a lot of stress from the process. This made a huge difference in what my total comp ended up being. Can you give me extra feedback on XYZ, which I'm always happy to do. So, I mean, a lot of the reviews and testimonials from that have just been like the highest of compliments, which I'm constantly surprised by, because I mean, these were just things that I picked up and have cobbled together and wrote for myself, and are now happening to, benefit other people. And the whole reason I came back to this whole like writing these business books thing was because I actually wrote them a long time ago, and then I was busy with life and my own job, and another job opportunity came up, and I'm like, well, okay, I need to negotiate for that. Let me crack open that book I wrote way back when. And I did. And I'm like, holy crap, this is good. Like this actually helped me negotiate way more out of that offer. I need to like promote this thing. More people need to know this thing. So, sorry if this is sounding like so self-promotional, but like, I think it is at this point, the only book to my knowledge in the world that's helped over 1,000 executives negotiate over $1 billion in compensation. Like it is pretty much the only ultimate resource on this thing. So if you want to get paid and not play, go check that out. That's my little, I'll end the little infomercial there.
The paid and not played might be one of my favorite little phrases. That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta be snappy.
Yeah. I can tell you did
here.
marketing. That's pure marketing right there.
There you go.
Okay. And what about from the book about being a VP? What's some of the feedback you've had from that?
That one's much longer. That one's like, sometimes I call that the magnum opus. That one is like, well over 100 pages. The VP or the compensation one's like much crisper and like getting to, 55 pages or something. The VP one is like just more full of frameworks around those things that we talked about, the hiring, communication, and culture pieces. So people, I think with that one, consume it more like a reference, like when they need certain templates or resources or ways to think about certain things, they'll like go to different sections in there and get what they need. But I mean, most people end up getting both of them because they usually come in and get the compensation one. So they, negotiate a good comp package. Now they're like, oh, he's got something on how to operate. Great. I'll get that too. So most people get both and say like, it kind of helps with the full life cycle of their job.
That's awesome. So Devon, I wanted to go back to when you were talking about the soul searching phase. What would you say to someone who is in that phase? What kind of things should they be thinking about? What really helped you in that time?
A lot of people have no idea like what they want to be doing. And they get this whole like analysis paralysis thing. They, try and sit down one night and find their purpose. And it's like, it's not really gonna be that eureka moment, whatever. But there is first off, there's a quote that I love from Sean Purry at the My First Million podcast. Maybe listeners are familiar with that one too. But he talks about how like life is more about motion than direction. And I have a whole like part on my website with my favorite quotes. And this is in there because it's, I should actually print it and put it on the wall. But he has this whole like, life is more about motion than direction. Imagine you're on a beach and you want to get to this fantasy island where all your dreams come true. But the problem is it's foggy. You can't see the island. So you just need to like get in your boat and start paddling. And as you go, you'll realize where that island is. So it's much easier to move a boat when you have momentum. You'll just put your paddle in the water and turn, right? So a lot of what I've done is just put paddles in water. Like I've had a lot of side hustles. I've had a lot of projects that, have not worked, have been complete failures, but the ones that do come out of those ones that didn't work. And I would just encourage people to, embrace that like motion, not direction thing, like just get going on something. And I think this is isn't that a Mr. Beast thing too, where like people ask him, how do I create a successful YouTube channel? And he's like, it's simple. Just go make 100 videos and then come back and talk to me. And inevitably it's like, once they just get in motion, they figure it out over the course of 100 videos. They don't really need his help. It's just, you got to go do the thing. So I have that exact same advice to anyone who asks me that question.
I think that sometimes we get so focused on quality that we don't do the quantity. So like, go make 100 videos. Most people could not actually make 100 videos. Making 100 videos is a big effort, but in the quantity, you start to find what the quality is. Like you go, oh, actually, when I say 50 times, obviously it doesn't sound good, so I start to smooth that out. When I do this thumbnail, this works, this doesn't. But most people would never do the 100 videos to actually figure out what quality looks like.
I talk about this and have these conversations a lot with people where they think it's either or. They think, you have to be sacrificing one for the other. But the whole like quantity versus quality thing, I mean, it is a shots on net game. Like, you're just going to have to take 100 shots on net for 5 to get in, and you will never know the 5. You can never predict which 5 it's going to be. Like, my whole TikTok channel, I've posted, I don't know how many numbers of videos, but like if you were going to ask me like which of the top 5 we're going to take off, which are going to be the 5 most successful, I would never been able to actually tell you which 5 did actually take off. So it is a numbers game. The best batters in baseball only have a certain, batting average. They're not hitting everything, right? So, it's it is a numbers game. I think Gary Vaynerchuk talks about this a lot, where quality is subjective, but quantity isn't.
Oh, I love that.
Everyone has a different idea of what quality is, but you cannot argue quantity. So do something you're proud of. Don't put out like garbage that you don't want to see out there, but get over your self-criticism and your fear of putting things out and just do it.
Do you think something out there is better than nothing out there? So even in your example about not putting out stuff you might not watch. So, on YouTube, you've got those nodding videos, like the reaction videos. I hate those videos so much, like with a fiery passion. But
Right.
One day I made myself do it, and the response was quite overwhelming. So sometimes it's like, does it actually matter what I personally like when other people like it? Is it better to put something out there for feedback?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. If you're forcing yourself to do something that you don't like or don't want to do, I mean, there's a difference between like what you're comfortable with, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone to do something versus doing something for the algorithm or for the likes that isn't authentic. So I would walk that line very carefully. I'm not here to, life is short. I'm not here to like do stuff that I don't want to do and just pander to LinkedIn or TikTok or whatever. Like, you know, part of your brand is being authentic. It's most of your brand. But you also got to push yourself out of your comfort zone sometimes.
How do you find that balance?
For me, I feel like I always did think of writing as my superpower. So I was most comfortable there. And pushing myself out of my comfort zone meant doing other forms of media. So video, I've been a video editor for a long time. I know how to edit, but I've never been as comfortable in front of the camera, though I knew that that was where all the eyeballs were. And if it was going to be good for the business, I had to step out of the comfort zone there and just do it. Now, there are a lot of million ways to do video, so I could still find a way that was authentic and I was comfortable with. And that was my balance, was I can do this, but I need to script it out first a little bit. I can't just go completely off the dome yet. I'm not comfortable with that. So I'll put the training wheels on. And that's how I crossed that chasm.
So I think that's a really tough balance, because you want to impact as many people as possible with your message, because most people are doing this because they want to add value. And especially in this age, the way that you can add value to the most people is by getting lots of eyeballs on it. So I think that's a really fine balance to tread, whether it's in content or in sales or whatever it is that you're doing.
And that's another My First Million thing. It's like, it just increases the surface area of your luck. Like the more you put out, the more random goodness is going to come your way. And I mentioned earlier, like making your own luck. I'm a big buyer of. I think a lot of the things in my career would not have happened if I hadn't stepped out of my comfort zone, put a piece of content out, gone to an event that I didn't want to go to in the first place. Like that is the genesis of everything good that's happened to me. So whoever needs to hear that right now, you know, I don't want to go to that networking thing tonight. I don't want to turn my phone on and record this piece of content or whatever. Like that has the power to change your life. That actually reminds me of a Stephen King thing, which if anyone's read his book on writing, it is actually probably my favorite Stephen King book, not even a fiction book, his like autobiography. And there's a whole section in there where he talks about how, like, you know, you have to put in the work and it is a slog, but there's I forget how he phrases it, but there's this like magic gnome in the basement polishing his trophies, and if you put in the work, that guy's going to show up, and he may not look like much, but he has, you know, the magic to change your life kind of thing. And I just completely butchered that. Go read the book, it's way better. But the idea is there that you know, it's going to feel like a lot, and then all at once something's going to happen.
And what are some of the other quotes that you feel have helped you in finding what makes you tick and what's good for you?
Yeah, I love with negotiation, especially, like I love the whole closed mouths don't get fed Jay-Z thing, where you have to ask. Like you won't, everything's negotiable, but obviously you're not going to get anything if you don't at least ask. So you have to like figure out how to ask the right way and all that, but like closed mouths don't get fed. There's a whole like perfection element that I've always fought against, maybe related to the quality thing we were just talking about, where like perfection is a trap. Perfection, I think the quote is, it's like a Winston Churchill one. It's like perfection can also be spelled paralysis. And I fight that monster every day. I'm like, you know, always want to be very polished and put out the best version of whatever, but it's too slow. I mean, you got to have more balls in the air than that. And I do really admire people who, and this isn't me, I'm trying to become more like this, but like I admire people who can juggle a lot. And you can probably picture people like this who might have like 17 plates spinning in the air at one time. And if 11 of them crash and break on the floor, like they still have 6 plates balanced in the air. That's more than my one plate I'm trying to do perfectly, right? So I've been trying to get better at that. And you can't do that if you need everything to be perfect. So that might register for type A's out there like myself.
And so just as we close, I wanted to ask about some of the tactics that you mentioned earlier. And there were two that kind of jumped out at me because I'm not familiar with them. So one of them was the odd numbers and the other was the bolstering ranges, I think it's called.
Right. Yeah, I love ending on a super tactical, let's punch in with some value here. So yeah, these negotiation things are just tips and tricks I've picked up along the way from much better negotiators than myself, but have really helped me at least. So the odd numbers one is like probably the simplest hack people can use to improve an offer or negotiate something, which is basically there's this like whole psychology around the fact that like an odd number feels more calculated. It feels more serious and permanent to somebody. It feels like the result of a thoughtful calculation, whereas a number that ends in 0 feels like something temporary. It feels like just something somebody threw out, right? So people take odd numbers a bit more seriously. When you combine that with the other thing, which was the range or the bolstering range, it's sort of similar where like instead of like stating one number, if you use a range, you're often able to get more than if you had just used that one number, because you'll end up wanting to use a bolstering range, which basically just means like use a range where the low number is actually what you want, right? Because if you give anybody a range, they're going to come in at the bottom end of it anyway. It's just a negotiation reality, right? So combine those two things I've used a lot and it's helped. I mean, beyond that, there's all sorts of stuff around like just making sure you never go first in compensation conversations and being pleasantly persistent on non-monetary terms and having a whole like positioning statement for yourself and, you know, knowing how to counter appropriately. So, I mean, all those, again, are things I've kind of like picked up from different places. I just admire good negotiators like Catholics admire the Pope. I'm like always trying to read and study and take little bits and tidbits. So those are some of them.
Are there any tips that you have for salespeople? So we have a lot of tech sales listeners, or sorry, a lot of people who are in tech sales that are listening to the podcast. Are there any tips that you have specifically for them?
For sellers, like going into like a leadership role?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I suppose the biggest thing is like if you're an account executive, if you live off commission right now, if your whole comp plan is you eat what you kill and you're an individual contributor kind of thing, but you're stepping into a people leadership role, an executive role, whatever it is, like, yeah, your life's going to change. It looks very different in terms of compensation versus what you're used to. And I would go back to the what piece I talked about earlier. So you have to get smarter about now all your options as an executive, because the way you're going to make a lot more is going to be very different than commission, right? It's going to be knowing how to get smart on the stock options or RSUs or whatever form of equity they have, on protecting yourself with the right kind of severance plan and the terms in that, of perhaps negotiating like milestone bonuses in some situations, big sign-on bonuses, things that you might not have been used to before. So it's a whole like get smart about those things.
And what about for people who are still going to be individual contributors?
Yeah. I don't typically talk to individual contributors as much these days, but I do get that question a lot, especially on like TikTok videos where your audience is all over the place. And people ask like, oh, well, this works for executives. This can't really work for me, junior associate or, SEO manager or like whatever it is. And I would say it's like a dual prong, like yes and no. Certainly the more senior you are, the more leverage you're going to have, the more stuff you're going to get. But everybody can get more than what they're currently getting. I've, talked to people fresh out of school. I've talked to interns. I've talked to, like the greenest of the green who were able to get a gym membership covered, or were able to get like a part of their tuition payment or some stipend for, whatever. And in a lot of those cases, it's more like, it's not a material amount to the company, but it's going to make a difference to that person's life. So it's kind of a win-win. It makes sense. If you know how to position it, it could be a no-brainer for them to, sweeten the pot a little bit. It's not going to be an extra $1 million in your comp package, but it could be, something that makes a good difference in your life.
Awesome. And so our closing tradition is that we do tick fire questions. So some of these will be just for you, and some of these will be things we ask everybody.
All right.
So first question, if you could have your own podcast, who would be your first guest?
In a dream world, Chris Voss. I think, the master of negotiation, FBI hostage negotiator.
Amazing. And so over the next 5 years, the VPs that are going to do the best will be good at what 5 things?
The VPs that do the best are going to be the ones who operate in this environment, whatever we're about to head into in the next 5 years, and get to this like profitable, efficient growth that everybody's really hot on right now. Can find a way to not just grow at all costs and, cash be damned. No, we're not in that environment anymore, but go beyond just being profitable and being super frugal and not investing in the things that'll help them grow long term. So it'll be the ones who can balance in that kind of profitable, efficient growth environment.
I love that term. At this stage of your career, what does success look like to you?
I want to cross off a lot of bucket list items, very selfishly, in an ideal world in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I got a lot of fun things I want to do. And I'm now in a spot where I own my own company. I've founded my own company where I want that to be successful to achieve those things. So, if we're talking about the business side, I want every executive in the world to know about the Compensation Bible, because it can help every executive in the world. So I want that to be like the best-selling business book ever on compensation, because I know it should be, it can be, and we're going to get it there. I want it in every bookstore. I want it in everyone's bookshelf. So that is my dream for the books. And then with the community that I'm launching, I just want to provide the most value in that and help that community grow, to be very successful. And then those are professional. On the fun side, I want to own a vineyard with my wife. She's a winemaker. We're, maybe getting to that point. That could be fun. I want to have an attendance EGOT. I want to go to the Emmys and Grammys and Oscars and Tonys. I don't need to win them, but I would love to just attend. That'd be fun. Yeah. I want to, have a place in New York. I want to just those big dream things. Would be very wonderful. But those are the results of the work, and the work is what I'm really, really passionate about right now. It's very fun to be a founder.
Amazing. Devon, thank you so much for being on our podcast. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I know it will help a lot of people. So thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you for having me on. And I hope that is what makes me tick.
Thank you for listening to another episode of What Makes You Tick. I hope that you enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed having the conversation.
Absolutely. There's so much value in learning from virtual mentors, people that have already gone through incredible careers, and they've got wonderful stories and lessons that they can share for you to have a bigger and better career in tech. And if you like this sort of content, we've also got a newsletter that we publish weekly called Growth Magnet, all about tech startups, leadership, scaling, and performance. We'll put a link in the show notes, and it'll be fantastic to see your comments on our next post.